The man calmly took out 2 spikes and then inserted them into the gangster's thighs. Then he connected the high-voltage electricity, then took out his daughter's photo and asked the other party where she was tied, but he didn't expect to get a face of saliva. Brian knew that time was pressing, so he resolutely stuffed the other person's mouth with a rag, and then the power switch was ruthlessly pressed and the current was beating wildly. After the first electric shock, the gangster still stubbornly refused to explain. Brian decided not to leave his hand. He decisively raised the voltage, because every minute was related to his daughter's life and death. Finally, under the impact of a deadly current, the gangster collapsed and revealed the truth. It turns out that Brian's daughter has been sent to an underground auction, and the person in charge of the auction is called St. Clair, but he knows nothing else. Brian, who got the information, didn't hesitate. He turned the current knob directly to the limit and turned away. Later, Brian came to the home of his old friend Claude. He clearly knew that the glamorous deputy director of the National Security Bureau was a key figure in the human trafficking network, and only from him could he find the whereabouts of St. Clair. And Claude has already seen that the furious, he first excuses to settle the children back to the room, and then went to the bathroom to take out the pistol hidden in advance. He pretended to be calm and returned to the table, and his former comrades in arms were now tit for tat. When Brian questioned the whereabouts of St. Clair, Claude suddenly pulled out a gun and pointed it at Brian, but he didn't know that the agent had already seen through everything. He slowly threw the bullets in his hand on the table one by one, and then Brian made a decisive move, shooting Claude's wife in the arm, and the other party immediately lay on the ground and whined in pain. Seeing Brian threatening his wife, he had to find out the confidential information of St. Clair through the internal system. After getting the information, Brian knocked Claude out cleanly, and then carefully forged his identity with the other party's documents, successfully mixing into the high-end clubhouse where he was intoxicated. In the crowd of powerful people, Brian's sharp eyes locked on the target. When he tried to sneak into the elevator again, he didn't think the security level here was higher, so he had to change his strategy, threaten the guards to enter the elevator with a gun, and then stun him and drag him into the utility room quietly. Then Brian disguised himself as a waiter and finally sneaked into the mysterious auction. However, the scene in front of us is suffocating, and young girls are displayed like commodities, and the rich people in the surrounding private rooms bid wildly. Under the dim light, money and desire are traded naked here. The last finale was the daughter Brian was looking for. The father did not hesitate to pull out his pistol, put it on the head of the man next to him, and asked him to photograph him no matter how much money he had. With a burst of bidding, it was finally successfully filmed for $500,000. But just as Brian was about to hand over, he was suddenly attacked from behind. When he opened his eyes again, he found himself hanging on the pipeline in the basement, and it was St. Clair standing in front of him. After hearing Brian's request to save his daughter, he said righteously, "This is just a special business, and the goods sold are not refundable. This is the rule here." Then he motioned his men to execute the uninvited guest. I saw a man pick up the belt next to him and strangle Brian hard. Brian suddenly noticed the shaking screws on the ceiling, so he made a fierce effort, and the heavy iron frame crashed down the security guard in front of him.